So I have a little bit of experience with it, but I'm ready. I've got my ducks in a row, as we say.
Yeah, well, you're telling your story.
Yes.
And why don't we go to the heart? Well, before we even get started into the facts of the story, why do you think this is important? You do explain it, especially, and I'll jump to the end of the book a little bit here, because this is so important to you. You actually go into great detail that, you had to answer the same question now that you answered in 1998. You were asked to go before Ken Starr.
Yes.
And what am I going to do about it? And you knew the answer, and that you have to speak up. Why?
Yes. Well, at that time, when I was being investigated by Judge Starr, my fear was that if I didn't tell the truth 100%, once I had to testify, that they would jail me, and they told me they did. I mean, a few.
You were facing 7 years in jail if you didn't tell the truth.
At least, yeah. And a couple times, FBI agents involved in the investigation actually threatened to arrest me. I came to this conclusion, Sean, that telling the truth is important. Protect the Constitution and the oath that I took to the President of the United States and the Constitution, and that one man does not supersede that. All this happened because one man couldn't step up. The man that was the President of the United States at the time couldn't step up and be a man and say what he did, and it all would have been over.
You signed no confidentiality agreement, so you have every right to write this book.
That's correct. And the reason I'm coming out now is because I want everybody to know the truth. I want them to know how these people function. And I want them to know about the wake of destruction of people that they leave behind them. Mm-hmm. This is the truth. I doubt I don't know if I'm going to convince anybody how they're going to vote. The most important thing about voting is as soon as you become 18, register and vote. Vote your conscience and get educated on it. And I hope my book, my true life story here, helps people, young people especially, understand really how they work.
At the end of the book, you said, what I learned about the Clintons firsthand the hard way is very important. It's 2016, but with Hillary Clinton running for president again, it feels uncomfortable like the 1990s again, as if America were trapped in some great, cruel time machine, literally hurling us back to the land of Monica and Mogadishu and 1,000 other Clinton-era nightmares. Fool me once, as the saying goes, your fault. Fool me twice, the bottom line, you go on to say, my job in the 90s was to lay down my life for the president. My obligation today is to raise my voice to help safeguard the presidency from Bill and Hillary Clinton and to remind readers like you what happened back then. We all remember, or should remember, what a Clinton White House was like. If we board that time machine for a return trip, it's our fault.
Yes, and that's true. As we go on in the interview, I'm going to be able to expand a little bit more, but there's just so many examples of for instance, routinely in the very beginning, in the early 90s, Mrs. Clinton uses the term the right-wing conspiracy.
Yeah.
There's no such thing. It's not the right-wing conspiracy. It's continuous bad behavior and bad decisions. And even when they do try to do some kind of policy, something maybe good for the country, it completely falls apart because there's so many scandals going on, they can't focus on running the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I've used this analogy before, Sean. If you took every scandal that President Bill Clinton was involved in and put it on single spaces, you couldn't fit it on 2 pieces of paper. It's incredible.
You describe her leadership style as a sycophant, disdainful of the rules set for everyone else who hasn't changed a bit.
That is 100% true. I never understood. It didn't take long to figure out how they worked and how they acted. And, at the time, I was a member of the Secret Service Uniform Division, and I just, watched what went on, and I observed the way people acted around her. And her co-workers, these people that we referred to back then as the Arkansas Mafia, friends from Arkansas, they were afraid of her. They were terrified. And at first, I'm like, I don't understand that. And by this time, I'd been close to her proximity-wise when I saw her lash out at somebody. And to me, it was almost comical. I was like, God, I've never seen anybody so upset over something so simple. And her anger and rage isn't fixing anything. It never does.
I don't think anger or rage works for anybody.
No.
You said, though, portrayed as the long-suffering spouse of an unfaithful husband whose infidelities I personally observed and knew to be true, the Hillary Clinton I saw was anything but a sympathetic victim. Now, those loyal to her kept coming back for these volcanic eruptions of hers. I witnessed firsthand the Clintons' personal and professional dysfunction. So consumed were they by scandal, so intent on destroying their real or imagined enemies, governing was an afterthought. Why don't you go into describing this temper that you're describing?
So, there's many examples of that. The one that always comes to mind is I refer to it as the blue glove incident, right? And so what happened is that a group of people were coming in to visit with the president and his senior staff.
And you said he was very charming to people. He would always want to give them extra time. He was always accommodating to anybody that came by.
Yes, 100%. He could. He was incredibly charming. I actually had the opportunity to introduce some family members to him one time, and my father, for 5 minutes, couldn't open his mouth. I mean, it was just incredible. And so anyway, Mrs. Clinton's anger at this time, these visitors were coming in, and through a series of errors with the uniform division, as these guests were coming in, there was about 30 to 40, I think, guests, and they were representative members of the Gay and Lesbian Coalition that helped get President Clinton elected the first time. And so under the promise that he would immediately allow gays in the military. And things were different back then, as you well remember, I'm sure. You know.
And then it became a compromise of don't ask, don't tell.
Right, and they were furious about that. Right. So the person bringing them in was former Congressman BYRNE Frank. So I'm actually posted at the Oval Office, and I get a phone call from a friend of mine, and he described to me, he said, heads up, we just had an incident. And what he described to me was, as the guests were coming in, the officers that were running the metal detectors, they were putting on these blue gloves that we're required to wear. When BYRNE Frank saw them putting the gloves on, he said, why are you putting those gloves on, officer? And the one guy, I refer to him in the book as Krusty. He's this great old Marine from the Vietnam era. He put the gloves on, he looked the congressman right in the eye and goes, why do you think? Well, what BYRNE Frank didn't know was the list that we had of who was coming in, it actually said on the top, HIV positive representative. Now that we all do that you can't get HIV that way, but we still have to wear the gloves because we're protecting ourselves from other stuff.
Right.
So
and that was standard operating procedure.
It was, absolutely. So when they got in, they took advantage of what happened there, and they berated the staff, and it got up to Mrs. Clinton, and she went off the deep end. And I describe it in the book as, on a scale of 1 to 10, this was about a 1, considering what goes on around the world and what the presidency is responsible for. So I get a heads-up phone call from an officer on the east side of the White House. Said, heads up, here comes Mrs. Clinton, and she's bad. So she came over, she went into the Oval Office, and she berated the president for about 40 minutes. It's so loud that the agent and I that were posted outside the Oval Office actually closed a doorway that blocked off the Roosevelt Room and some outer hallways because she was so loud. And she berated the president. She blamed everything on us. She called us a bunch of...
Yeah. Don't worry, you can't say it out on radio. I know what you're going to say.
She called us a bunch of rear ends and used a lot of foul language. And it got so bad that at one point, the agent looked at me and realized, he said, the president is actually defending you guys. And it was kind of a comical moment. I'm like, oh my God, the president's defending us.
She wanted to get rid of you because she said, oh, they're loyal to George Herbert Walker Bush. They were here with him, and they're disloyal to us. They have been from day one.
Sure. They did have a weird paranoia about the Bush administration. They actually replaced the phone system because they thought they had a tap. Almost a brand new phone system.
Wow.
When they first got there. And it was expensive, and they didn't have a way to pay for it at first.
Yeah, well, you talk at length as to how they became, spending a lot of money was a big issue, and you had to draw straws to give her the bad news. Tell us about, you start chapter 1, the vase.
Yeah. So I come into work one morning. I'm assigned to the Oval Office. That's my permanent post at the time. And I come in early, I get my workout in, and as I'm heading over, I run into a couple of the people that work in the mansion. And they said, oh, wait till you get in there and hear what happened. So I'm like, oh, okay. So I went over to the mansion and talked to my buddy who worked on the mansion floor. And I said, hey, what's going on? I just saw George and so-and-so that they said something happened. They said, oh, that the president and the first lady had this huge fight last night. And it was so loud that the people that work in the mansion that take care of the first family, like they backed away downstairs and it was loud. And then there was a loud noise, like a crashing sound. And when it went up to be investigated, there was a broken vase on the floor, and you know, nothing at the
It was across the hole from where it was normally placed.
Right.
It wasn't like it didn't fall over.
No.
It was thrown.
Right. That appears to be.
And the next morning he had a black eye.
The next time I saw him, he had a black eye. Now I don't, you know, I wasn't there, Sean. I don't know if he hit her, if she hit him. I don't know if she threw the vase at him. I don't know how he got the black eye, but I'm gonna tell you this: the gardener didn't give it to him. Nobody in the Secret Service hit him, and so when he came down that next morning, you know, you could see they were trying to hide a black mark with makeup and stuff.
Right. It didn't. Yeah. It didn't work. And you even asked. Oh, and they said it's allergies. And
right.
The answer was allergies in one eye, not two.
Right.
BYRNE. We have a lot of time. Another hour with Gary. He's going to stay with us. His brand new book. It's making a lot of headlines. His first interview. It's called "A Crisis of Character." A White House Secret Service officer discloses his firsthand experience with Hillary, Bill, and how they operate. You can get the book at Amazon.com. We have it on our website, Hannity.com, and also in bookstores everywhere starting tomorrow. But first, I told you about the summer blowout sale and the Bible at the head of an officer. Oh, by the way, did we mention drug use in the White House? All of that.
Him being berated, and I understand he had a high-pressure job, but when I described to you how uncomfortable this man looked, I mean, he didn't look comfortable in his own skin. He wanted nothing to do with the Washington, D.C. and the pressure that it brought. And when the story, when I was actually working the day, he took his own life, and they found him in Fort Marcy Park. And when the message came out, I will tell you, I was sad that it happened, but I was not stunned. I really wasn't.
Because you saw this guy under pressure. She was constantly berating them and
sure,
browbeating him.
Sure. When you hear the staff that worked in the White House in the West Wing talking about how bad she berated Vince Foster as opposed to how bad she berated anybody else, that's pretty significant. And these are things, Sean, that I swore, you know, years ago, up until recently, I was going to take all this to my grave, because I said I would never talk about these things, but clearly somewhere, and I'm very uncomfortable about talking about it, but it's important for people to know the truth. Somewhere in the last year and a half, I've crossed through a threshold, and I've changed my mind, obviously. And it is what it is. There's no going back.
So your purpose is really to warn the American people. She is not as she seems.
No.
In other words, the temperament question has come up a lot in this campaign as it relates to Donald Trump.
Sure.
You're describing somebody that does not have the temperament to be president in any way, shape, matter, or form, and that she hides it, and she puts on a public persona and a private persona.
Yes.
And privately, she berates staff, berates even Secret Service
sure.
officers like yourself.
That's correct.
Says F off to them.
Yes.
Tells them to go to hell.
Yes.
You tell two specific instances. Talk about that.
Sure. So the one that always bothered me the most, and so we had a uniform division officer who had been on the job a short period of time. Nice guy, top of the line type person. He had been in the military, and he actually had been wounded in Somalia. Now, he was wounded in Somalia before what we would call today the Black Hawk Down.
Black Hawk Down, yeah.
Right. So he was actually shot by a sniper, and he received the Purple Heart. Now, when you're working at the White House in the Uniform Division, people don't know that have been in the military or you have won an award, but they do know you're a police officer. You're wearing a uniform like the Uniform Division officers do. And he was walking down the West Colonnade, and he said, "Good morning, First Lady." And she looked at him and said, "Go F yourself." And he came back to the break room, and he was discussing it. And another officer who had something similar happen to him, they started discussing it, and the sergeant overheard him and started pushing it up the chain of command. It's not that it hadn't happened before. It's just that the way it happened with this guy, when it got up the chain of command and the senior agents found out who this guy was, they felt bad about it.
But there was a phoniness about her.
Absolutely.
For example, she would treat you one way when nobody was looking.
Right.
And she would berate you.
Right.
And then when guests were around, she'd put her hand on your shoulder and say, "Oh, this is my favorite agent."
Yeah.
And then, for example, you described the relationship with her husband. If the cameras came in, they were lovey-dovey. They were the closest couple in the world. But in reality, they were anything but.
Right. That's what I experienced. That's what I saw. I saw a lot of examples of the going from normal Hillary, which is distant and cold, to here comes a camera, or here comes somebody that she needs to impress, say, somebody who donates money or somebody who's helping them, and immediately she flips a switch. I've seen it many a time. Everybody in the Secret Service that worked around them saw it, Sean. The difference is they're not coming forward. And I understand why they're not, but like I said before, clearly I've crossed some threshold and things have changed.
But Bill was different. Bill did when
and
you heard this conversation.
For sure.
You're right outside the door.
Everybody heard it.
Everybody heard it.
Yeah.
And you heard them fight constantly.
Not constantly.
A lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just what I heard. You know, I know as people read this book, you might get the impression that the people in the Secret Service, the agents and officers, are a bunch of, you know, old ladies sitting around telling stories. If you and I are working together, Sean, and you're relieving me, I have to tell you what's going on, and that's how we find out about this stuff. So the fact that the way she behaved the night before in the holding room at a dinner, I would hear the next day, hey,
did they sleep in the same room?
I have no idea.
Nobody would know that.
I certainly don't.
You would know based on where your position was.
Well,
but
I did. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I did have the opportunity. Because of the position I had outside the Oval Office, my top secret security clearance had some things added to it, and it also gave me the opportunity to do escorts. So let's say you're the guy they hired to come in and fix the floors. I would escort you on a weekend while the first family wasn't there up in the living quarters. I've been up there,
right,
but I didn't see anything that was out of the ordinary. You know, it looked like it's a beautiful place to live, and it looked like a normal home to me.
Let's talk about the women. And
Sure.
It wasn't just Monica.
Yeah.
And Monica was not as slick as everybody knew she was out to hook up with the president.
Sure. She kind of left a trail of breadcrumbs. You know, you had to be pretty switched off not to understand why she was asking you, you know, where the president is or how your day's going, and did he leave the mansion yet? And she was purposely trying to place herself in his path, and that's what brought her to my attention, and why eventually, after a short period of time, I tried to get her removed. And it worked for a short period of time, but then it didn't.
Bill Clinton personally got her the pass to come back.
That's what I believe, absolutely. I mean, How else do you get it? I mean, this is a big deal. When you get that White House pass, that's a big deal.
That means you have full access for the most part, except for the Oval Office.
You have that blue pass. You have access to the West Wing, to the ground floor of the mansion.
Right.
Yeah, it's
that's
a big deal.
And an intern doesn't usually get that.
No.
But the other thing that really shocked me, you said there's many women involved here. I mean, you talked about Eleanor Mondale,
right?
Former vice presidential candidate, former presidential candidate Mondale's daughter, caught. I think it was in the blue room,
map room,
the map room,
yes,
on the table, making out with Bill.
Right.
And
they were in front of the table, but yeah.
And there were many others. How many others?
So I don't really know what the count is.
Best estimate.
Yeah, I'm aware of easily 3 to 4.
These were regular people that he would see that you knew he was having shenanigans with.
Well, not regular, but I know that he had contact with them, and also some of them were regular because they were people that traveled with him or met him on the road when he would go on the road.
And so the agents knew that they were meeting her.
Absolutely.
He was meeting them.
Absolutely. I heard quite a few stories from the agents about. They actually, when I was trying to intervene with Monica, and before I kind of put 2 and 2 together that it was really happening, that they were having this affair, that one of the agents said to me, Gary, stay out of this. You don't know what happens on the road. I heard that many times. Gary, you don't know what's going on the road. You're not with us all the time. And you don't, so.
Were they trying to look out for you? That was a heads up.
Yes.
Don't get yourself.
But I had a great working rapport with those agents, and especially
Well, let me ask you about that, because I read some reports that some of these guys are mad at you, but have others contacted you and said, hey, thank you?
Yeah, I'm getting a lot of support from my uniform division brothers and sisters.
Right. But the agents there might have been a little bit of competitiveness between the agents and the officers.
Yeah, there's always been a rift between the agents and officers. They actually run the Secret Service, and the individual people that I work with are great, but the Secret Service mentality, the way they manage their people, is horrendous. It's terrible, and I don't. This is not blaming the Clinton administration. This was going on way before that. But the Secret Service management style is tough. It's do as I say, not as I do sometimes, and they work you into the ground. They're using the same procedures they've used for 70 years, and the same manpower statistics with so much more work to do than there used to be.
Who got the Bible thrown at his head?
So this agent that I worked with, I was working with him on post one day, and I had heard the story from somebody else, but I didn't know who it was. And I turned to this guy and I said, "Hey, did you hear the story about? Did one of you guys get a Bible thrown at you?" And he looked at me and he goes, "Yeah, it was me." And as soon as he told me,
and he got hit. I mean,
right, so
it hit its target.
They were in the limousine on the south grounds of the White House, and I don't know what she was pissed off about. Sorry.
No, that's fine. No, I say it all the time.
Mad about, but
no, she was pissed off.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
she had a Bible in her hand, and she lunged forward and hit him in the back of the head with it. Now, he got out of the, opened the door and he turned around, and he made it very clear to her that that was not tolerable and it wasn't going to happen again.
And you even described in the book, you guys, if the first family is struggling to pick up luggage, you are not, as protocol dictates, you're not allowed to reach down and help them.
Keep your hands free.
You got to have your hands free. Because if an incident occurs,
right.
I mean, I carried a weapon all my adult life.
Sure.
You're not going to be able to get to your weapon if you're picking up luggage.
That's right. And you're right about that. And the other thing is, just more importantly, when it comes to protect these, is you got to get your hands on them and get them moving. You got to move them away from the danger.
Right.
And that's really the agent's primary job.
And that's what you're hired for. And you're willing to take a bullet, and you're willing to go down and give up your life for these people.
Yes.
That's why, to be treated so horribly. Go to hell, F off, Bible's thrown, total dismissal.
Yeah.
She really treated the officers and agents like crap.
Yeah, she did. And
every day, though. This was a regular, unless somebody was around, it was, I hate. Right. Why do you think she hated?
I'm a psychologist, but I'm an expert on observation, so I'm gonna just say what I think here. And over these years, I just think she has an issue with men, and my whole thing with her and even her husband to a certain extent, the Clinton machine, as I call it, they don't like law enforcement and they don't really like the military. I'm sorry, and I have opinions and stories of why I believe that, but they just don't seem to like them. And they'll say, obviously they say that, how much they support the military, but let's look at the incidences that have happened, and they weren't supporting them. And the same with law enforcement. And
by the way, there was a distinct difference. You described the time that you had in the White House with the Bushes, and they were lovely people. But you're not speaking politically here. I don't even know.
No.
I mean, you don't want her to be elected president, so I assume that means you're going to vote for Donald Trump.
Well, I'm not going to talk about who I'm going to vote for yet, but.
But the Bushes were nice people, genuinely nice people.
They were.
Respected the officers and agents and the hard work.
Sense of humor, great, kind people. And, in hindsight, when I think about it now, Sean, it kind of set me up for a huge shock when we changed administrations and the Clintons end up being the way they are. And it's because the Bushes were like that family.
Did Bill ever come out of the Oval Office say, "Guys, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry you had to hear that"? And
no. But one time along those lines, Sean, he was in a meeting. The president was in a meeting in the Roosevelt Room, and he was crossing back over to the Oval Office. And whatever they were discussing in the meeting was pretty hot and contentious, and he was upset about something. And as he walked out, he was berating somebody about getting something done. And clearly, you could tell that somebody dropped the ball, or whatever. As he was walking back in the Oval Office, he started screaming at this, or raising his voice at this one, man and this woman whose job it was to do whatever it was. So as he's yelling at them, he walks right by me and the agent posted there, and the door was already open for him. And as he walks in, he turns around, and they said something to him, and he turned around and screamed at me, "Close that, effing door." And I just kind of looked at him. I looked at the agent. We kind of smirked at each other, and I stepped in and grabbed the door and I pulled it shut. So a little while later, he comes out into the steward's little kitchen area to get himself a soda. Right. And I walked back just because I heard a noise. The outer door was open. I walked back to check, and it was him. And he looked over. He said, "How you doing today, young man? How's it going?" I said, "Good, sir. How are you?" And he didn't apologize, but he broke the ice.
It was his way of saying.
Yeah, that's the way I interpreted it. And he was very friendly, and he was very nice. And once in a while, he would ask you a personal question. Your family, that kind of thing. It was not always horrendous.
We got more time. When we come back, we still have
Then there was the map room incident with Eleanor Mondale. You know for a fact that there were other women as well that we don't know whose names they are, and you're not disclosing them.
No.
And you even, at one point, hid evidence for Bill Clinton.
Sure.
Did you know you were breaking the law doing that?
Well, it technically wasn't evidence because I didn't know there was an investigation going on. I didn't know that. But yes, there was an incident, a couple incidences where the Navy steward brought to my attention that he had found some hand towels white hand towels that were, in one case, stained with lipstick, and in another case, stained with men's fluids, what appeared to be.
Oh, good grief. This is the president. This is the Oval Office.
Yeah.
Reagan wouldn't take his jacket off in that office, for crying out loud. I mean,
right. He wouldn't walk across the seal.
Yeah.
So when I mentioned earlier that I've gone through some kind of threshold, there's a good example of what pushed me through it a little bit. It's just bizarre. So the steward was describing.
So you knew who it was.
Listen, any adult male knows what we were looking at. And,
right.
And my fear was that, the only people that handle that stuff were the Navy stewards downstairs that was.
They're all laughing in there. Stop. This crew's got us. That's my crew. They're very bad people. They want the salacious details.
Yeah. They wash the towels. They would know. These guys are Navy men. They know what they would be looking at. And at this point, I was trying to protect from any more rumors. So I told Nelvis, I found a plastic bag out of the trash can liner. I told Nelvis to throw them in the bag, and I destroyed them.
Right.
And then, of course, sometime later, when the story broke by Matt Drudge, and then I heard about it on the Howard Stern show.
Right.
And I knew right then. I mean, my stomach almost flipped out of my body. I was so terrified because I connected the dots instantly. That story's true. It's out. They're gonna come after us.
It's just got to be surreal. Here you wanted to do this job your whole life.
I did.
And the next thing you know, you're throwing out soiled towels of the president with his mistress.
Yeah.
And mistress is.
Yeah. And in the case of the intern, by this time, or at some point, she becomes a government employee. So now she's a government aide mistress. It was bizarre when you think about it in hindsight. It's just crazy.
Well, I mean, it's certainly reckless for a whole variety of reasons here.
Correct.
Let me ask you this question. You said during the shutdown, when Monica was visiting and she gained access that she wanted so badly, were you there at that point? You were outside the door.
I was.
So when all this went on, and she was there a lot more than we knew.
Yeah, sure. What you're describing is, and the shutdown was actually kind of a windfall for Monica. Because the way it works is the only essential people can come in now. So the only essential people that were allowed to come in and help President Clinton was one assistant, which would have been Betty Curry,
right,
and then Leon Panetta, and he could have a couple interns. And she ended up being one of the interns. And in hindsight, it was like, it's almost comical.
Right.
I mean, you can't write this. And so that's when she gets. So during this time, these interns, they were across from the Oval Office in the Roosevelt Room, and that's where they were kind of working at it. And when they needed something done, they would go and find them there and then ask them to do it.
And if Hillary came by during any of this, you were supposed to refuse Hillary entry?
No, you can't refuse the First Lady entry. But we certainly were paying attention to her movements. When you're a protectee of the Secret Services...
And they would talk to you saying, watch out, she's on the warpath, that you would know before she came down.
Right. They would use her call sign. They'd say, Evergreen moving, Evergreen moving. Well, you already know she's in the mansion, so she's leaving the private living quarters.
Right.
And then you would, once she hit the ground floor...
When he got caught with any of these?
I'm making out in the Mac room.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it was like full on. It was.
Yes, they were like two high school seniors, lip locked, hugging each other. And what happened was, one of the housemen, Navy stewards, went to go into the room to deliver a clean shirt to the president. He had a shirt in his hand, and as he started towards the door, he said hi to us. I just happened to be standing there on my way back to my post, and he opened the door, but he was looking at us, and there they were.
But everybody knew. How did he not think this was going to come out?
I don't think
everybody knew.
I don't think he
cared.
I don't think he cared that people knew, because he was used to being covered. He was used to being protected. He was used to getting away with it.
So it was expected that your job is you're going to be quiet about this.
I think, in hindsight, I think that everything that I heard from Arkansas, from the troopers and sheriffs down there, was true. And
one officer actually told you that everything you hear about them is true and worse.
Yes, and when he did, I'm telling you, it was like he was looking right through me. Like it was significant. I mean, I only knew this guy for a couple of minutes, and when he told me that, I felt like it was somebody telling me something. Gary, here's some good investment advice for your life. You know what I mean? He was serious, and he meant it.
Yeah.
And it was a very bizarre time, Sean.
You talk in the book, for example, we had become work friends. He knew that by serving the president even a single cup of tea to ease his mind, he served his nation, whatever the president needed, whenever he needed it. And you're talking about the White House, what's the position?
So the steward.
Steward,
yeah. I'm probably describing Nelvis there, but there were quite a few stewards. Yeah, there were quite a few stories. They have a great history. Traditionally, they were actually all Filipino men.
Yeah.
And they have a great story behind that. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're describing a surreal.
Yeah.
Tell us about the end of your relationship with him. He's getting ready to, when you were leaving.
So, leaving Nelvis?
No. Leaving, for example, you left
right.
job.
Right, so with the president. So, sometime before the story broke, I had basically had enough of what was going on, and I didn't know what was coming, but I was tired of seeing some of the stuff that was going on, and it was time for me to move on. So I was trying to get into a position in the Secret Service Uniform Division tour section, and they do all the tours for the public and for the first family and events. If you've ever been to the White House for an event, the Uniform Division people screen you in and out, and so anyway, I wanted to go to tours because I had enough of what was going on at the Oval Office.
Yeah.
And then eventually I left tours and went out to the training center to get away from it. And then, of course, when the story broke, all those relationships with those people were under huge strain because everybody was terrified about testifying. And
so you didn't want to do it?
No, I did not. I wanted nothing to do with it because I knew that I was going to have to talk about stuff that, I mean, it sounds silly saying it now because I'm coming out with all this, but it was really nobody's business. And I mean that as far as it could all been stopped by the president coming forward and manning up and doing the right thing and saying, yes, this did happen. Here's the steps we're going to take so it never happens again. And I'm sorry. And get on with running the government instead of that huge debacle with Congress. It was incredible.
Yeah. You were even threatened at one point that somebody would arrest you in front of your pregnant wife.
Yes. The FBI agent that was involved in one particular day when I was being deposed at Judge Starr's temporary office, and they were trying to get me riled up, and they did. And it was a little embarrassing that I let them get me riled up, but you can only when you threaten to talk about somebody's spouse with your first kid,
that's a little nutty.
Yeah, it was over the top, and he got what he wanted, a reaction, and I gave him one.
When we hear the stories and we go over, for example, the secret server email thing of Hillary.
Yes.
When we hear that, and you discuss a little bit in the book about Benghazi and some of the other current events, but that fits the character.
Absolutely, it falls right into place. It's the same mentality or actions that I saw the whole time I was there. Hillary Clinton, I don't have to follow procedure. You do what I want when I do it. Do as I say, not as I do.
You say all of this was such a distraction to such a big level that governing was last on their list.
Yeah, that's exactly the way it appeared. And this is somebody who watched close by. When all your staff, when George Stephanopoulos and Rahm Emanuel and these guys are doing nothing but putting out scandals and trying to fix stuff and twist it, Christ, they must have been exhausted when you think of all the scandals.
You even talked about Leon Panetta and Dick Morris huddling. Leon Panetta was the target of Hillary and Dick Morris discussing how to get rid of him as the chief of staff.
Well, I'm not sure if they were actually trying to get rid of him, but what they were doing is they were meeting with Dick Morris at night. Now, we would see Dick Morris come in usually around 10 o'clock at night. We'd get a phone call from the Southwest Gate, and the guy'd say, hey, Gary Morris is here, and he'd come up, and he always looked like he was lost in the West Wing. He'd come through the West Side, and then if the president wasn't in the Oval Office, we would give him directions to walk to the next office or get him over to the mansion. And then, now, of course, we used to
Was he closer to Hillary or to Bill?
Well, he was closer to Hillary. She apparently was his friend. And he was, back then a Republican operative,
right. And
he was teaching them what he had kind of claims he invented was, triangulation. Excuse me.
Triangulation, right.
Triangulation. And so now, of course, we don't know what's going on, but when I read Leon Panetta's book and he talked about this, it fell right into place.
Right.
We used to see Dick Morris coming in all the time. I mean, we never said anything to anybody. That's not our job.
It had to be a cool job, though, for you. I was thinking about this as I was reading about your life and background. I mean, every day you're seeing big names coming in and out.
It's incredible. It was. I never wanted to leave, and of course that changed when this bizarre stuff happened. I would, in hindsight, if that hadn't happened, they would have had to take me out of there in a wheelchair with a crowbar.
What did you think about Clinton when you knew he was lying to the nation?
I was embarrassed. I was disgraced, and I was afraid because I was afraid. I mean, as far as the relationship with the intern went, I was afraid. I knew it would come back to us.
You know it would. You know it would come out. There's too many people that knew.
You know, one of the things that saved us, and I talk about this in the book, was that Linda Tripp did the right thing.
Yeah.
Linda Tripp did the right thing.
By the way, Linda Tripp and Monica wouldn't have met but for you pushing and forcing the issue of getting Monica out of there.
Right.
It didn't last too long, but long enough for her to meet Linda.
Yeah, I believe that's correct when she went over there. So, Linda Tripp, Linda Tripp, by encouraging Monica to keep the dress and then getting hold of it, that was evidence.
Right.
And if that wasn't there, it would have just been our word against his. And the ideal that you can go in there, I mean, maybe the president and Mrs. Clinton and high-up government people can get away with answering under oath of I don't remember, I don't recall, but somebody in the Secret Service is not going to get away with that.
One of the things, I've been to the Oval Office maybe 4 times. I don't, you would have been gone by then.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I walked in there, it was like a surreal experience.
Yeah.
Like, you don't really feel, like it seems like everything is in slow motion.
It never goes away, that feeling.
Because I almost felt like, wait a minute, this isn't really the president.
Yeah.
This must be a double.
Yeah, no.
Did anyone ever tell you that before?
Yes, and I've experienced it myself, where it's almost like one evening I had an opportunity to introduce my parents and some family friends to President Clinton.
Right.
And we were taking a tour, and he was coming back, and from the east side, he was doing some public service announcements, and the agent said, "Hey, we're bringing him over. Just have your family staying here, you know." And he came up and talked to them, and they were just floored, and it was great, and it was a great experience. And it's one of those things when I talk about having a hard time coming out and whatever pushed me forward to do this. That was one of those experiences where I felt, you know, I certainly feel like the word betrayed comes in there, but clearly I think it's more important for the American people to know the truth about these people.
And you're ready for what's coming your way after this interview.
I am.
And you don't care. You already thought that through.
I care, but you know, when you do the kind of work that I've done, and people that do what I do, you know, you look at your goal and you look what's important, and then you take the actions you have to.
You think the country needs to know this before they go and vote in November?
I do. I absolutely do.
So the person that we know in Hillary Clinton is a phony. It is a mirage. It's not real.
No, it is.
It's a carefully manufactured political robot, basically.
It's not even carefully manufactured. If you really pay attention and you're not completely a Democrat or a Clinton follower, you see these things I'm talking about. You know it's true. You see the edges. You've heard these stories. And if somebody that does what I did and is taking the risk, you know, I'm not taking this risk for any other reason but the truth. You know, by the time this is all over with, who knows what's going to be left to me, so to speak. So, but I think it's important. People need to know this. And, you know, if what I've done it is really not right, well, then I'll deal with that someday when I'm judged, you know, in heaven. So.
Well, the book is phenomenal. I couldn't put it down, honestly. I opened it up this weekend, and I'm like half asleep, but I'm still reading it. You know, when you're fighting sleep when you're reading a book you really like.
We wrote some of it like that.
Yeah. Crisis of Character is the name of the book. A White House Secret Service officer discloses his firsthand experience with Hillary, Bill, and how they operate. He'll join us on Hannity.